What's up, everybody? It's Reginald Lafayette Bullock II here from Bull Eagle Tech with the IT Career Secrets course. Today, we are going to start going through the Security Plus guide. As I said, I'm Reginald Bullock. You can call me Reggie, Reg, whatever, as long as the check clears. Some of my credentials are my MBA, my PMP, ITIL V3, Security Plus, and Certified Ethical Hacker. And thank you all so much for joining the training course, and let's get started. So today's training is going to pretty much jump right in to the Security Plus and a little bit of prerequisites for this training is I recommended that you've read the book cover to cover, and I also recommend that you've looked at some other some training videos. So what I've done with this study guide is to kind of combine for studying purposes. We're going to combine several different concepts of the Security Plus material and link them together so that you get kind of some actionable being able to tie concepts together, and which will help you pass the exam. And more on that, we have the Security Plus exam simulations, which is a training environment in my course. If you go to bulleagletech.com, thanks everyone who's signed up for the course. But this exam simulation is going to look and feel exactly like the real exam. And we have a random question bank that cycles out 1,000 questions. So the more you take it, the better you'll get. And once you hit that 84% target repetitively, you'll be ready for the exam. So here we go. Security basics. So as we know, the CIA triad is what? The C stands for confidentiality, I, integrity, A, availability. This is not the intelligence agency, as goes in the movies. And so for confidentiality, the goal of confidentiality is to keep things a secret, if you will, keep things confidential, and only those who are able to should have access and understanding of the data do. So encryption helps with confidentiality. It turns message into code. Access controls are another thing. Identification, authorization, and password and permissions. Stenography is a hidden message in plain sight. So you can hide the text inside of a photo or another type of media file. Integrity ensures data is not tampered with. So when you think of integrity, you think of someone who cannot be compromised. So hashing is creating a derivative of code in an algorithm, and if the data is changed, the future hash will too. So, for example, if something you send over if you were to hash a message, that would ensure, and the message was once hashed, the code was 123 ABC. When the receiver of that message opens the file, they're going to look at the hash, and if the message is 231 ABC, then they'll know that that's not the original file, and the integrity has been compromised. On the contrary, if it's 123 ABC, then they'll know that that's the exact file. And so we'll get into hashing a little bit later, but just when you see hashing, understand that that's touching on the concept of integrity. Digital signatures, certificates, and non-repudiation. This is similar things here. So non-repudiation is when a person cannot deny that they sent something or own something. Public key infrastructure enables certificates to function by maintaining encryption keys and certification management. And so availability. So pretty much, I'm not going to say self-explanatory in the security sense, but availability means what it means. So some of the concepts associated with it from the Security Plus are going to be redundancy, fault tolerance is set to ensure that the data is retrievable when needed. Single point of failure. At any juncture, if there is a single point of failure, then the whole system ceases to function. So for availability, you want to identify that. And then we'll go into disk redundancy, RAID, server redundancy, load balancing, so that multiple servers can support a service at the same time, so it doesn't get overloaded. So if you have 100% going into one server and that server is functioning at 100% capacity, then that can slow down the information flow of that server, or the performance of that server. But if you have two servers and you put them both at 50%, then you still have that 100% information flow or capacity from a performance perspective. And then they'll have that the extra 50%, which will give them higher performance and speed. So that's a very, very simple, very simple explanation. But yeah, so we're moving on. Site redundancies. If a fire or flood takes place in one location, the other locations, do you have backup? So this is where you introduce concepts such as a hot site, cold site, warm site. And so hot sites are readily available 24/7. Cold site is where you have the location and maybe some equipment and data, maybe some equipment there, but nothing it's just completely cold. So you have to bring in the people, the equipment, the data, the personnel, and set it up from scratch in the event of a failure. And then a warm site is a mix between the two. So you might have some things operating at minimal capacity and can get spun up quickly, but it's not a cold site, and it's also not 24/7 operating like the hot site. Availability, again, backups, data stored in multiple places, alternate powers, cooling systems, HVAC, hot and cold aisles, things like that. Patching, make sure that your systems are bug free and clear and up to date. Safety. So safety of people, emergency escape plans, drills, and training. Often secure facilities will unsecure in case of emergency to ensure human safety. And then the safety of assets, physical security measures like locks, sliding, fencing, CCTV, man traps, checkpoints, things like that. So here, this is a key concept that you have to keep in mind on the exam. And this goes back to the ethics and the principles of the CompTIA itself. So anytime you see a situation or an exam question that talks about safety, you want to understand that human life is most important. So they'll send trick questions to say, what should you do in the event of a fire or a terrorist attack or whatever? What should the people do? Should they burn down, go through their procedures of securing the data, or should they ensure their own safety first? So people always come first over technology. Layered security or defense in depth. So you want to have multiple security mechanisms in place to ensure the security of a system, an organization, in general. So there's no single approach is enough. So if you just have a common access card, but you don't have, security guards, etc. So every step and layer and phase needs its own security protocol. So each of these steps will operate independently, but they will cohesively make up security in depth or layered security. So some examples of this are CAT card, smart card used to ID people, and then that same person will have a PIV, a PIN associated with that smart card, so that they can secure in. And then on top of that, there may be things like OTP or HMAC-based one-time passwords. An example, rolling key-based systems. Now there are tokens that were kind of physically handed out, and then those tokens have changed to like time-based tokens, where it cycles through a set of numbers that you have to enter into that set of numbers. And now they have digital tokens as well. So all three of these things kind of together make up layered security or defense in depth. Authentication. Kerberos functions on Unix and Windows Active Directory domains. It prevents man-in-the-middle attacks through use of mutual authentication, uses tickets to prevent repeat incidents, and requirements KDC or Key Distribution Center. So some of the requirements for authentication services are Key Distribution Center, TGT or ticket granting tickets. Certificates are packed within digital authentication tickets or tokens. Time stamping and synchronization. Tickets are only valid for a certain amount of time, so systems must use them within 5 minutes of each other, and timeouts prevent replay attacks. And replay attacks basically intercept authentication data so third parties can connect, or bad actors. The use of symmetric key cryptography, or one key encrypts and decrypts. And then the opposite is asymmetric encryption key, which utilizes two keys, a public key encryption hosted by the PKI, and a private key distribution. So lightweight directory access protocol, or LDAP, and secure LDAP. And the X.500 based that, when secure, can use TLS and specifies formats and methods to query a directory of objects, users, computers, directory objects. And then Microsoft Active Directory is based off of LDAP and enables single location to interact with all resources on a directory. And secure LDAP utilizes the transport layer security session, or the TLS, to encrypt the data. And LDAP version 2 uses SSL encryption, but version 3 uses TLS. Single sign-on, or SSO, feature enabled in both Kerberos and LDAP. So that's a key thing that you want to keep in mind in the back of your head. If you see a question on Kerberos or LDAP, you want to associate that with single sign-on. Users, wherein a user signs into a network once and then receives a token, which can sign them into all necessary systems. Federations enable two non-homogeneous networks to coordinate permissions for users. So these two networks aren't necessarily connected, but they're in a federation. So they're able to coordinate and communicate permissions for users. Users hold credentials on both networks, but signs into the federation, which treats them as a single account. So just imagine you have one computer set of networks and then another computer set of networks, which are not connected. However, they're both within a federation. So imagine you watching whatever system you're on, insert name here. Let's just say your name is Dexter and I'm Reginald Bullock. We're both in the same location, but we have two independent networks. And so within that network, we have a federation of our credentials. And so and I can just sign into the federation one time and have access to both my network and your network. SAML, security assertion markup language, is XML based, and it allows websites to enable federation like trust privileges so that users can access resources on both. The principle is the user identify provider identity management utility contains the ID and passwords, and your service provider serves principals redirecting to different hosts or domains. RAS, Remote Access Server Authentication. Access via dial-up or VPN, Virtual Private Network. PAP, Password Authentication Protocol, is clear text, insecure, and single authentication. It utilizes PPP or point-to-point protocol, used clear text over dial-up. Nobody thought about the risk of wiretaps were a legitimate risk when they created this. That's just a little joke there. Challenge handshake protocols, or CHAP. Server challenges client can happen multiple times in a session. So more difficult to crack because of a hashed code at the start of the session, which we talked about that in confidentiality. The Microsoft CHAP in version 2. Radius is remote authentication, dial-in user service. It's a centralized method of authentication for multiple remote servers, and it encrypts passwords, but not the whole authentication process. So it only encrypts the password. Utilizes UDP for best effort connection. Diameter, radius, but it utilizes EAP for better encryption, and it utilizes TCP for guaranteed net connections. XTACACS, Extasis, extended terminal access controller access control system. It's Cisco proprietary or Taxis improvement, and it's outdated. Taxis Plus, that's what I call it. Cisco proprietary alternative to Radius, interpretable with Kerberos, which remember that for single sign-on. Works on a wide host of environments, encrypts full authentication. It uses TCP for guaranteed connections, and also used to secure network devices like routers by corporations. So Taxis Plus is one of the better ways to go. AAA protocols, authentication, authorization, and accounting. So authentication proves the identity. Authorization determines what should be able to access, and then accounting tracks what you do. So accounting is going to be, and it's not financial here, but it's more of like logs and things that are utilized where you can track things. Here we'll go full screen for a sec here. Boom. Moving on. Nobody wants to see my face. All right. Control implementation methods. Excuse me. I need some water. All right. Control implementation methods. Technical controls utilizes technology. Management controls uses administrative or management methods. And then operational controls are implemented by people on the day-to-day operations. So technical controls, technology installed by administrator that automatically provides protection and reduces vulnerabilities. Encryption, things like antivirus software, IDS, intrusion detection software, monitors a host and reports on intrusions. And firewalls restrict traffic to a server or host. And least privilege, the principle of least privilege, which is only allowing each user the minimum privileges they need to limit the risk of something going wrong. Monitor detectors, motion detectors, fire suppression systems, and other such devices are also technical controls which help provide additional physical protection and safety. And management controls, also known as administrative controls, these use planning and assessment to reduce risk. So risk assessment, quantitative assessment uses cost, assets to determine how much it'll cost to protect X amount of value of assets. And qualitative assessment categorizes the risk based on probability and impact. So qualitative and quantitative, remember those two terms. So when you think of quantitative, think of a more mathematical approach. Qualitative is more of an assessment. When I think of qualitative, I think of words. I know it's pretty general, but this is more of an in-depth analysis that has to happen, where it's more based on risk, but not necessarily things that associated with numbers and money. Vulnerability assessment is used to discover current vulnerabilities and weaknesses to help prioritize the implementation of additional controls. And then penetration test, actual attempts to exploit vulnerabilities to determine how easy it is to do, and if there are vulnerabilities to a system, and what the actual effects are on the organization and the system. So penetration tests are done, which we'll get into later, where you have your red and your blue team. The red team is the penetration testers, and then the blue team are pretty much the day-to-day defenders of that organization. And this is when we'll get into the different types of hackers, where you have your white hat, your black hat, and your gray hat hackers. Black hats are the bad guys, apparently. The gray hats are the kind of in between, and then your white hat hackers are your ethical hackers, or those will be the white hats will be the people who are conducting the penetration test. Just to clarify that. Operational controls, people implemented practices in compliance with an overall security plan. So awareness and training, prevents social engineering, people writing down passwords, etc. I'm sure if you've worked in the government, or for most organizations, they require people to go through some type of cyber awareness training. It talks about, just general social engineering, stuff like that. Configuration and change management. It ensures systems starts in a baseline of security, and that changes do not invalidate the security features. So just ensuring that if you make a change, you've already, there's a process in place where no one can just make changes to the system whenever they want or however they want. Media protection. Don't lose flash drives with valuable information. Physical and environmental protection, so cameras, doors, locks, HVAC systems, etc. NIST, and NIST, we're getting into policies here. So the National Institute of Standards and Technology, it hosts the ITIL ITL Information Technology Lab, published the SP 800 special publication, which are security standard documents that many IT professionals and certifications reference directly. These are invaluable security standards. There are many other NIST publications. So NIST it really has a large set of standards and policies that are best practices globally, where policies are then created based upon these standards. And that's a control as well. It would be more of like an administrative control where you have policies in place. Control goals. So preventative controls, hardening, application hardening, or system hardening, making a system more secure than default by deactivating unnecessary features, creating restrictions and disabling accounts. This is pretty huge here, because a lot of companies and organizations will have, say someone leaves a job or gets fired, and there's no time where the security administrators or the people, the security operators for that organization will go in and disable their account. So oftentimes you'll have people who have left the organization under any circumstances, years ago, and they will still have access to that account, that organization's system. So this is just something that companies need to be extremely cognizant of, especially during this time where we're increasing more remote work and remote onboarding. Security awareness and training. It ensures users are aware of vulnerabilities and social engineering attempts. Security guards often will deter potential attackers and can verify identities of people. Change management, again, make sure changes aren't made on the fly, make sure that they're studied first, make sure that there's an assessment to ensure that the changes that are made won't undermine or override or compromise an existing security preventative mechanism that could then lead to a vulnerability. Account disablement policy. If it ain't necessary, I don't nix it. Really accounts that, again, this goes back to what I was saying earlier about the application hardening and disabling accounts. So if it's not necessary on the system, or you have applications or different features of the applications that aren't being used, ports, etc., ensure that they're disabled if you're not using them, because a bad actor could come in and use that as a mechanism to compromise the system. Detective controls. So here we have preventative controls, and now this is detective controls. Log monitoring, for example, firewall logs track everything blocked to help reveal incidents. Trend analysis, taking note of an increase of firewall denials, or you can use a SIEM tool, SIEM tool, which will allow you to, some of them now have machine learning or artificial intelligence where they can analyze trends over time. You can use systems like McAfee Enterprise or Norton or Splunk, ArcSight. These are some different tools. Security audit can detect if users are using good passwords, or if users have more rights than they need, or even just auditing the system entirely to see where vulnerabilities are. Video surveillance, closed circuit television, CCTV, motion detectors. This again goes into detective controls, where if you have somebody coming in, after hours or whatever, and in the dark, and it kind of can do the Mission Impossible thing where it can detect. You guys know what motion detectors are. Most people have them in their homes, or at some point have seen these. Corrective controls, active IDS, detects attacks and modify environments to stop them. Intrusion detective systems. Actually, it's IDPS. So identitative and the detective and preventative systems are what modifies the environment. The detective only just detects it and logs it. Backups and system recovery. It fixes, when it breaks. So you want to ensure that you have backups, so that you're backing up you're backing up your systems and your servers, as we talked about, like with the hot and the cold site and different things like that. That way, if something does happen, say there's a fire, or someone messed up the system, or a system was compromised, you can go back to a recovery point, which can still have your data to a certain point. Deterrent controls, cable locks, especially for laptops or things like that, and even different physical hardware devices like monitors, servers, etc. You want to ensure that you have cable locks. It makes it harder to take hardware locks. Again, it's a lock. Compensating controls, temporary controls while implementing other things, or when things go bad. Physical security, so perimeter, fencing, barbed wire, um, uh, just keeping the area secure, building, ensuring that you're securing the building, that you have, depending on the level of security needed for that building, you might need to have security guards, either unarmed or armed security guards, metal detectors, etc. Secure work areas. Don't let people in that aren't supposed to be there. So you can utilize, like, again, physical security guards, or man traps, things of that nature, turnstiles, server and network rooms, hot and cold aisles, HVAC locks, again, hardware locks. So some of the physical security here want to think about are tailgating, when an individual without access authorization closely follows an authorized person in a reserved area. Then the malefactor takes advantage of that moment when the authorized one opens the door with his badge and then sneaks inside behind the closed door. So how can you avoid that? You can do things like a man trap, which will be, you'll pretty much have two doors. A man trap is like you open a door, you enter into this designated zone where only one person can really be in that kind of holding area where you're kind of trapped in, and then you have to badge into another door after the first door closes. So this is a preventative physical control, security control to prevent tailgating and piggybacking. Access control lists and logs. They track who goes in and have only security guards let people who need access or authorized to be in that area access to that area. If someone exits the building but is never logged into the building, they might have tailgated. So you can have badging in, badging out, access control lists. Video surveillance is also good. CCTV, motion detectors, fences. Motion detectors can also modify lighting. So you can kind of save money here with adding in motion detectors, so you can see after hours. You might not have to have as much of a physical security presence. Alarms, barricades. Barricades are more like they have different types. So you have your concrete barricades. You have your more of like your aluminum that you can lift up and kind of put them in place to secure an area temporarily, block off areas. Bollards, these are like cylinder, like columns, short vertical poles. They're in the ground. And so you have different types, heavy barricades, but bollards are really for like vehicles. So they prevent vehicles. These are like really fixed structures. So you have some that are in the ground that are stationary, where like they're spaced out in a way where vehicles or cars can't get through. And then you have others that are more automated, and there is a motion mechanism where if you press a button, the bollards they disappear into the ground, and then it allows cars to pass through, and then you press another button and it raises them back up. No trespassing. Signage is also a thing here. Locks, doors, just in making sure that you have the right type of doors in the area. In general, have less entry points to certain areas. So you want to make sure that you're controlling each entry point, especially into secure facilities. So you don't want a ton of doors that give access to a facility, especially on the ground level, on the exterior, where people can can kind of penetrate. You want to funnel people into one or two entrances. Cipher locks, press the buttons in the right order to open the door. They're secure, but they can be cracked or compromised through different ways. Proximity cards, you can identify people with special cards as they get closer, or proximity cards. They can be stolen, but just like you have to have security and awareness training so that it ensures that people are properly taking care of their identifications and things like that. So there's defensive depth again here, layered security, fingerprints, retina scans, facial recognition, ID badges. So logical access controls. And here we talk about least privilege, recommends that users, systems, and processes only have access to resources, networks, systems. They only have access to the resources that are necessary for them to perform their assigned function. So you don't want to just give people access to everything. You only want them to have access to what they need to have access to. Group policy allows you to change a setting once and have it affect the whole group. So you don't give an individual user permissions to folders. You give you give group access permissions to that particular folder, and then you give the individual access to the group. And what this does is, especially if you have someone that is leaving an organization or moving to a new role, you don't want 100. If you say you have 50 employees, you don't want to have 50 people having access to 10 different folders, right? Instead, you will have one group assigned to 10 different folders, and then you will have all of those 50 people given access to that one group or several different groups. And what this does is that when people change or rotate, whether the number goes up or down, you don't have to remove that one individual from 10 different folders, which can get tricky, and you can end up leaving somebody with access to a folder that they're not supposed to have, or to an application or anything that they're not supposed to have. So what you do is you give that person access to the group, and then you only have to remove them or add them one time, as long as the group's permissions are set properly. Access control models. So subjects, users, and groups, we kind of just described that as well. So you want to ensure that you have really an architecture of how or kind of like a topology of access control list of what users and what groups should be associated with different files, folders, shares, printers, etc. Role-based access control. And this is kind of what we're discussing, is that instead of assigning permissions to users, assign permissions to specific roles, and assign the roles to specific users. So the Microsoft Project Server operates with this 4 chief roles. So you have administrators can access anything, adjust anything. Executives can access anything, but have no control over the settings. Project managers have full control over the data and the settings within their projects, and team members can only report on the work that was specifically assigned to them by project managers. Then you also have other things like view access, edit access, and even if you have something like Google Drive, and say you were to share a Google Drive, a Google Word document with someone, you can determine a role-based access control, saying, do they have access to edit this, or do they only have access to view this? And that is an example of a role-based control in kind of a daily life situation. These systems can often be hierarchical, or I always get trouble with this word, but has a higher level of accounts, have higher access, have more access. So when you think of hierarchy, think of, like, let's say the government, right? You have the president, you have the vice president, then you have kind of like a chain of command here. Maybe a military is a much, maybe a better analogy here where you have a general, and then you'll have a captain who will report to the general, and then the lieutenant who will report to the captain, and then the lieutenant is, in charge of the sergeants. And so at each level, you have more access the higher you go. Obviously, the general is going to have the most access. Matrix planning documents to set up tables explaining the permissions before the roles have been created to make sure that they make sense and cover all of the possibilities. So here, this is planning, access control planning, where you want to ensure that before you actually start just giving out permissions willy-nilly, you want to ensure that you have your practices kind of documented out in a way where it makes sense. Okay, rule-based access controls, such as when firewalls and routers use access control lists. So you have role-based and rule-based. Static rules allow or disallow traffic on a specific port. Dynamic rules is when an IDS adjusts rules to block specific traffic. So say, for example, and then when Marge has more permissions than Homer is absent, when Homer is absent. So that's a rule. So when Homer is taking care of something, then you can change the rule so that Marge has more permissions. Or say, for example, you can adjust the rule to block all IP addresses coming from the Ukraine, so, or all IP addresses coming from a particular town, or say, for example, you've looked at your tool and you've determined that IP address 196 dot something 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 dot something something something. That IP address tried to deliver a Trojan horse attack on the system, but you caught it. So going forward, you submit that IP address to be blocked as a rule, and so no traffic is allowed onto the system coming from that IP address. Discretionary access control, DAC. Every file folder has an owner who sets who can access or modify or view this particular folder. So it's access given based on discretion of the owner. NTFS is known for this. So every new technology file system object has a discretionary access control list, which notes the security ID of users. And so discretionary access control is filled with access control entries, or ACE, which contain the security ID and associated permissions. So Trojan risk, if you install malware with administrative privileges, that malware can continue to operate within those same privileges. So this is very critical to ensure that you're not giving something that shouldn't have access discretionary access control, because then they can kind of control if they have administrative access. This is like the worst case scenario when a malware or some type of vulnerability or bad actor really gets a hold of administrative privileges or root access. They can pretty much do anything to the system at that point. So that's like the worst case scenario. Mandatory access control operates under the privilege of the principle of least privilege. Again, both users and objects have sensitivity labels, and only if the user has equal or greater label and a need to know, then they can access that file. In high security situations, multiple levels of checks are enabled before deciding if a user is need to know in any given matter. And this system is very slow and inflexible, but it's very secure. So prime example of this is utilizing like many governments have top secret, classified, and then unclassified, or even a public classification. So the higher the sensitivity label, the if you only have if Reginald Bullock only has an unclassified clearance, then the system won't allow me to see. Well, system will only allow me to see unclassified information. And in order for me to see top secret information, I need a top secret clearance, and I also have to have a need to know of the information that I'm particularly looking at. So just because you have a top secret clearance doesn't mean that you get to have access to all top secret information. Only the information that you need to know from a principle of least privilege for the job and the role that you're assigned to. All right, I'll pop back on the screen for a second. Network security protocols, basic connectivity protocols. Here we go. So TCP, the handshake session oriented communication. UDP is best effort communication. IP, host identification. ICMP, basic connectivity, trace route, ping, can cause DOS vulnerabilities. ARP, IPv4 or to MAC address. ARP poisoning gives false updates to redirect or interrupt traffic. NDP, neighbor discovery protocol. IPv6 protocol, similar to ARP, also identifies default gateway and performs other auto configuration efforts. Encryption protocols. SSH encrypts SCP, secure copy, and SFTP, secure file transfer protocol, among a wide variety of others. So SSH can also encrypt TCP wrappers, a type of access control list on Unix systems, and it uses port 22. So SCP, based on SSH, and copies encrypted files over a network. Secure socket layer, SSL, secures HTTP into HTTPS with the use of certificates, and can also secure SMTP and LDAP. TCP 443 is for HTTPS, and TCP 465 for SMTPS, and TCP 636 is for LDAP with SSL. So we'll get into a bit later in another presentation. We'll talk more about some of the top ports that you'll need to know for the Security Plus. But for here, this kind of breaks down some of them. Encryption protocols. TLS, transport layer security, designated replacement for SSL, and it has the same port as SSL. IPsec encrypts IP traffic, native to IP version 6, but also on works on IPv4. It encapsulates and encrypts packets and then uses tunnels to protect VPN traffic. Authentication header, AH, protocol ID number 51. Encapsulating security payload, ESP, IP protocol ID number 50. And uses Internet Exchange Key, IKE, over UDP 500 for VPN security. All right, so some ports here. HTTP, port 80, HTTPS, port 443. Remember that you'll see that a lot on the exam. So HTTP is port 80, HTTPS 443. FTP, 21 for connection and 20 for data, port 21 and port 20. SFTP, secure file transfer, Port 22 for data because it uses SSH. FTPS, file transfer protocol secure, like SFTP uses SSL or TLS. Ports 989 and or 990. And TFTP, trivial file transfer, UDP port 69. Telnet is outdated CLI-based remote connection protocol. Sometimes used to connect to routers, clear text, and insecure. Port 23, PUTTY, operates similarly to Telnet, but it includes SSH. SNMP, Simple Network Management Protocol, monitors and manages devices like routers and switches. It sends requests to SNMP agents on devices on UDP 161 and receives info back from agents on UDP 162. NetBIOS allows for basic LAN identification and sessions. UDP ports 137 and 138, and TCP ports 139 and rarely 137. More ports. LDAP communicates with directories like Microsoft Active Directory or Novell Network Directors Services, NDS. It provides a single location for object management. It's TCP 389. And when encrypted with the TLS or SSL, it's port 636. Kerberos authenticates in Windows domains and some Unix environments. Uses the Key Distribution Center, KDC, to issue timestamp tickets. UDP port 88. Remember, think single sign-on when you think Kerberos. Microsoft SQL Server. SQL Server hosts databases that web servers and applications use. Port 1433. RDP, Remote Desktop Protocol, can connect to systems from remote location and used in remote desktop services and remote assistance. It's TCP or UDP 3389. Email protocols. SMTP transfers emails between client and SMTP server, and this is TCP port 25. Secure SMTP or with SSL or TLS is port 465. POP3 transfers emails from servers to clients, uses TCP 110. Secure POP3 with SSL or TLS uses TCP 995. IMAP4 stores emails on a server and allows users to organize and manage email in folders on servers. TCP 143. And secure IMAP4 with SSL or TLS uses TCP 993. All right. Domain name system. So DNS uses UDP 53 for URL queries, and DNS uses TCP 53 for zone transfers when name servers exchange updated records. And DNS uses the bind Berkeley Internet name domain software on Unix and Linux servers. And ports again. So IANA, Internet Assigned Numbers Authority, maintains a list of official ports assignments. So ports are default routes that different protocols use for data. This allows administrators to block certain protocol interactions just by closing or opening ports. So this is port 65, 535, UDP, and TCP ports. And well-known ports 0 are 0 through 1023, and registered ports are 1024 through beyond. These can be registered by single companies for proprietary use or by multiple companies to establish a standard. Dynamic and private ports 49, 151 through 65, and 535. Any applications can use these and can be temporarily mapped. Most attacks are on well-known ports. Ports scanners check what ports are open and then know which data can be tampered with. Protocol IDs are not to be confused with ports. You can allow or block traffic by a protocol ID, but the ID does not match up with the ports. So I have a list of about the top 16 known ports, and I will be putting that out in the course area as well. Assorted basic network security. Switches are more secure than hubs because they limit where the traffic is sent and received. So say that again. Switches are more secure than hubs because they limit where the traffic is sent or received, and thus it disables sniffers. And switches can be affected by loops when a cable is connected needlessly between two ports and data is unicast looped through the connection. STP, Spanning Tree Protocol, and RSTP trivialize the risk by not letting routings suck that bad. So STP also protects against attacks because a jerk could always just mess with two RJ45 jacks and slow them down on the whole network. And switches can group several computers into a VLAN, isolating network traffic. This allows people who are not in the same physical proximity to work together. And physical ports are not just being used, can also be disabled on the switch to prevent people from connecting to the network. And this can be known as hardening. MAC address filtering can also accomplish this, where a port only attempts specifically named MAC addresses for connections. And 802.1x is much better security than MAC address filtering or physical port disabling. It works with radius or diameter and requires authentication to connect, and can customize features such as allowing non-authenticated users internet access, but not local data. Routers don't pass broadcast, so segments are separated by routers or broadcast domains. Routers allow the use of access control lists, just like firewalls, to identify allowed traffic. This filtering can be for IP addresses, ports, protocols. This means that you can block traffic from specific computers or network segments. Implicit deny is pretty important for security, and it insists that anything not specifically allowed is denied. So firewalls offer similar access control list based security features as routers. A brick wall really is between inside and out that prevents certain kinds of traffic. Advanced firewalls that fall under unified threat management can do much more than a simple packet filtering. Host-based firewalls operate for a single host and can prevent invasions and exploitation through the NIC. These are essential when using public Wi-Fi. So ensure on your own public Wi-Fi that you're using a host-based firewall. Network-based firewall controls traffic going in and out of a larger network segments, but best between internal network and the internet, and usually a dedicated system with monitoring, filters, and logging. Sidewinder. Sidewinder is dedicated server with proprietary firewall software. Rules similar to firewall rules, so similar to routers access control list, ACL, permit / allow or deny, protocol ID / port, source, and destination. When configuring, start with implicit deny. Allow all traffic that you know and want, and that's it. Web Application Firewall, or WAF, specifically protects web apps hosted on a server and blocks traffic to NOOP sleds and NOOP ramps. Detects malicious code sent to web server. Advanced firewalls, first gen packet filtering rules, stateless, works only according to the ACL. Second gen stateful inspection tracks sessions and inspects traffic based on session status. Third gen application level firewalls, aware of specific commands used in apps or protocols. And WAF are third generation that inspect HTTP. And next gen, closer to UTM and frequently adding new features. Firewall logs and analysis. Log all allowed traffic, all blocked traffic, or both. And scripts and apps make it easier to review logs. IDS uses firewall logs to identify intrusions. For example, a port scan attack will query lots of well-known logical ports. If logs are enabled, this is visible and can be used to prevent further attacks. So here, we just hit an hour, so we're going to go ahead and take a break. Thanks everyone so much for participating in today's training. We'll have more training for you guys coming forward. We're going to get through, right now we're on slide 46 of 196. So we're going to get through the entire book of the Security Plus. And this is an active guide that kind of, it's really a study guide that will allow you to put concepts together. We started off with the CIA. So when we come back, we'll be working on protecting the network perimeter, talking about demilitarized zone, NAT and PAT proxies, and we'll keep going until we get to the end. So thanks everyone so much for joining us today. I'm super excited about going forward. So we're going to stop here at an hour, and we'll break these up into 1 hour chunks until we get it done. See you in the next one. Peace.